Thank you. Okay, I'm going to call the Planning and Development Committee meeting to order for this Tuesday, July 5th. First order is attendance. We have everyone here. Councillor Bell is joining remotely, and okay, we haven't heard from Councillor Howes.
Councillor Howes has sent his regrets.
Okay, thank you. I'll take us to the approval of the agenda. I'll ask, is there anyone that wishes to add anything to the agenda? Councillor Gatward?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have 2 items under other business.
2. Anybody else? Okay, I also have an item under other business. 2. Okay. Also, if you look
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chair Miller, I would like to raise one item under other business.
Oh, okay, go ahead. Oh, sorry, you got another item under other business, Councillor Bell?
Yes, I do. Thank you. Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, if you look at your agenda for this evening, you'll see that under item 11, there's a staff report on the home-based business and extending that pilot project for another 2 years. We're going to move that item from 11.1 to section 9 because it is going to be that's a public meeting. So, and if you look at section 9, that's public hearings under the Planning Act to consider staff recommendations. So just make a note of that will be moving under section 9. Other than that, 4 items under other business, 1 item moved. And can I get a motion to approve it? Councillor Pierce, moved by, or second by Mayor Bailey. All in favor? Okay. Declaration of pecuniary interest. I think everyone will do so if they have one at the appropriate time. We'll go on to item 5, adoption of the minutes from the previous meetings. I look for a mover. A move by Councillor LaFerriere, second by Councillor Gatward. Any discussions, questions, omissions, corrections? You see none. All in favor of approving those? Thank you. Any business arising from those minutes that we don't deal with in the normal course? Okay, see none. We'll move on to item 7, and that's again like last month. We have a grant telecommunication tower hearing, and this one we actually did hear for public information last month. So for tonight, we are going to look at a staff recommendation, and I'll call Ryan up. Ryan, just before you start, the members of the public, if you're here for a particular application this evening and you want more information, there are sign-up sheets at the back. So make sure you do put your contact info and your name, and the planner will add you to the list. That's just for anything that you're interested in. Okay, Ryan, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good evening. Again, as noted, this is with respect to application CT321RC. It would be from us on behalf of Signum Wireless from Fontour International Inc. 17 Ewart Avenue. The subject lands are located on the south side of Ewart Avenue, east of County Road 18 in Cairnsville. Frontage of approximately 202 meters, an area of about 3.6 hectares. Subject lands currently house the County of Brant Cairnsville Fire Station, as well as the future Cairnsville Community Center. Subject lands are designated as employment in the County of Brant official plan, also zoned as heavy industrial M3. The applicant is proposing to construct a 60-meter self-supporting telecommunications tower surrounded by a fenced compound of approximately 15 by 15 meters. The applicant has provided a site selection report, a site plan sketch, as well as a consultation package. The applicant hosted their own open house on May 4th, 2022. We received the comments package May 9th, and then this application, as noted, was presented for information last month at the June PDC meeting. Staff is recommending that the application be approved with the 3 items noted in the report, 4 items noted in the report to be sent back to Industry Canada endorsing it, as the tower will benefit the county by providing a suitable tower to host the Brant County Fire Department equipment, as well as multiple parties and other telecommunication providers. With that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Okay, any questions from the committee to our planner at this point? Seeing none, Ryan, thank you. Is the applicant here to speak to this? Okay, she's not even on Zoom? Okay. Okay, no questions from the committee for the planner. Obviously, we don't have the applicant here tonight. So what I'll do, I will open up this part of the meeting to the public, and I'll ask if there's anybody from the public that wants to speak to this application. Seeing none, I'll ask a second time if there's anyone from the public that wishes to speak to this application. And I'll ask a third and final time if there's anyone from the public that wishes to speak to this application. And prior, I'll just check, make sure nobody's on the Zoom. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to close this part of the meeting off, and I'll bring it back to the committee and ask how the committee wishes to deal with it. We'll go to Councillor Coleman.
Mr. Chair, move the recommendation.
Okay, can I get a second?
Print it.
Okay. Councillor Ferry, second. Any questions, discussions at this point? Councillor Chambers.
Just a question. Did the applicant give a reason for not attending? It's kind of unusual that they don't. Is it that they didn't know about the meeting, or they couldn't be here, or did they give regrets, or what's the deal?
Through the chair to Councillor Chambers, no, there was no indication for why they couldn't attend.
Okay. And Councillor Gatwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The last paragraph of the recommendation asks for archaeological assessment. Did we do an assessment of the lands already when we did the community center and fire hall?
Who could help us with that one?
Yeah. Through the chair to Councillor Gatward, I am not sure of that answer just yet, but it's something that we can look into.
Because if it's already been done, would that be satisfactory
Of course. Yes.
to the Mississauga people rather than having someone repeat the same process?
Absolutely. If it's been done, there would be no need to do it a second time.
Okay, thank you.
Good catch. Any other questions or discussion? Okay, see none. Recommendation's been moved in second. I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Bell's in favor, I believe. Thank you. Okay, that concludes the telecommunication tower part of the meeting. And tonight we don't have any hearings to just receive information for any application, so we'll go right to number 9. And tonight we have 2 hearings under the Planning Act to consider staff recommendations. The first one is ZBA, well, PS2 20RCs and ZBA 33-20-RC, and this is for 61 Bethel Road, Paris. We've seen this before this committee, and there was also a public meeting which I attended via Zoom there. Ryan, go ahead and start your presentation.
Okay, thanks again, Mr. Chair. This is with respect to applications PS 220 and ZBA 3320RC. Owner being Panatoni Developments, represented by Web Planning Consultants. The applicant has submitted an application for a zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan subdivision for the proposed industrial development of the subject lands. Subject lands are located on the northeasterly corner of Rest Acres Road and Bethel Road, just south of the 403 interchange. The applicant is proposing 4 blocks for prestige and light industrial uses, as well as 4 blocks for stormwater overland flow routes and a pumping station. In addition, there are additional blocks required for road widening and 1-foot reserves to determine future entrances for these developments. Subject lands are designated as employment and natural heritage within the County Brain official plan and are situated within the primary urban settlement area of Paris. Development is proposed to contain prestige employment and light industrial uses, including and not limited to offices and industrial related service uses. Proposed draft plan will implement the intent of the employment designation by allowing for efficient development within a priority employment area. The current zoning of subject lands is holding prestige industrial M1 and natural heritage. Zoning bylaw amendment proposes to rezone the lands to holding, special exception, prestige industrial, holding, special exception, light industrial, and open space to allow for an appropriate range and mix of prestige and light industrial uses, including warehousing and ancillary offices. Applicant's also proposing site-specific provisions which would require a minimum parking provision of 1 space per 160 square meters of GFA for warehouse and ancillary uses. The committee will note that we have attached a list of draft plan conditions which we believe cover the majority of or all of the concerns raised to date. We do note one additional condition that we are proposing to be added with respect to well monitoring. I'm going to let Mr. Webb perhaps speak to that in his presentations here to the committee. And the clerk does have that additional condition that we're proposing to add to protect the interests of the neighbors. With that, I'd be happy to take any questions at this time.
Okay, any questions from the committee for Ryan at this point? Go ahead, Councilor Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I'm not sure if this is going to be for you, Ryan, or for the applicant, but if we look at the diagram here, and if we kind of make comparison to this east side of Rest Acres Road to the west side of Rest Acres Road, I understand the main road that's going in there, they're calling it Road A. I get that, but it appears that there's a road that goes out that exits onto the back end of Potchefstroom Road, and I'm curious as to why. There's no reason for that. All that's going to do is potentially put truck traffic on that bottom end of Potchefstroom Road. All we have, I think there's 2 residents down there and a gravel pit. I don't think there's any need to have an exit on there. If they want to dead end it, that's fine, but it should be set up the same way as it is on the west side of Rest Acres Road in the other industrial park, how it's a main road in and out. Curious if you can answer that, or the applicant, or where to go.
Go say, Ryan, you want to give it a shot, and then we can still ask the applicant.
Sure, through you, Mr. Chair. I think part of the design criteria here, what we look at, and you know, I suppose it's a fair point with respect to the Westerly Brantford Green Business Park. We analyze these proposals based on best practices for traffic management, and I rely on the expert advice of our engineering folks, and they seem to think it's fine. So I'd also obviously like to defer to the applicant to weigh in that regard.
Okay, I appreciate that. One more, if I could, Mr. Chair. In regards to the parking, the reduction of the parking, it works out to, I think, around 16 less spaces per 100,000 square foot. So we're confident that because these are warehouses, that we're not going to get caught with lack of traffic or lack of parking with these. You're confident on that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I can summarize in short, I've seen a couple concept site plans, and there will be no shortage of parking. And if it's of any benefit to the committee, we supported a more significant reduction in warehouse parking for that project to the north of the highway very recently as last year, the Ford project. And so we're confident that you know, the parking that's being proposed here, it will be more than sufficient for the needs of this development.
Thank you.
Councilor Ferrier.
Hi, Ryan. I know it's in the environmental impacts portion, some part of it in the report you wrote, but can you speak a little bit to the natural heritage piece of this? Because it says here when we read the environmental impacts that, you know, natural heritage can be developed wherein they're able to essentially move the same sort of natural heritage space somewhere else on the space. So can you talk about how that would actually be done in this case?
To you, Mr. Chair, yeah, I'll touch on a couple of things here, Councillor, if that's okay. I think, and if we're looking at, my apologies, the second page of the report, my colleague Michelle, our environmental planner, provided some good input here. And I think a key point to note here is that it's been identified as an anthropogenic wetland. That's man-made pond. And I think when we're evaluating wetland or natural heritage features, we're looking at several factors such as the size, and species at risk, and then also, you know, whether or not it's a man-made feature and whether that could be replaced by a man-made feature. In this instance, Conservation Authority as well as our environmental planner are confident that the new swim block will act and function as an improved wetland feature within the area.
And if I can follow up, Mr. Chair, through you to Ryan, thank you for that answer. And is that the designation that is now would be then open space? Is that what that is referring to?
Yeah, that's correct. Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct. The open space OS1 designation generally applies to open space features. That would be also the swim block as well as the channel. And so that channel will, you'll see here highlighted in green, will carry the stormwater through the site to the stormwater pond and then ultimately outlet to the river.
And if I can ask one last follow-up, Mr. Chair? So why change the zoning? I understand we're changing the area, but why change the zoning from natural heritage to open space? Why not natural heritage to natural heritage move into that block?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think when we're looking at it, that block that will replace the natural heritage primary function is a stormwater pond. That's municipal infrastructure, and that's just our typical function is or practice is to zone our own stormwater ponds as open space blocks. I understand it's a reasonable comparison, but I think in our best practices, it's not typical for us to zone or designate man-made features as natural heritage. Now, I know that's contrary to what we have there currently, but
maybe that should have been, through Mr. Chair, maybe that should have been open space designation previously?
I'd prefer not to speculate.
Okay.
But yeah.
No, I appreciate the answers and the frankness. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Bell, I don't want to miss you.
Nothing from me. I would, that said, I would like to just stand behind what Councillor Pearce had just said. I'd like to understand the reasoning for that extension of Street A onto Potter's Road.
Okay, and we will ask the applicant as well. Any other questions from committee for our planner? Okay, seeing none, thank you, Ryan. And at this point, I will call the applicant forward or the agent thereof. They want to speak to this. And if I can get your name and the company you work for.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, the green button.
All right, how's that? That better? Thank you. And I'm speaking to you tonight on behalf of the development manager for the property, which is Panattoni Development Company. Also with me tonight is Chris Serio, representing Panattoni. Chris is here to assist me should any additional questions arise that I'm not able to assist you with, so Chris is here as my backup. I would like to make a brief submission this evening, if I may. It's an oral submission. I don't have a visual presentation. We're before this committee tonight in full support of the recommendation that's before you in the staff report that's seeking approval of two planning instruments, a draft plan of subdivision and an implementing zoning bylaw that's been worked on by ourselves with your staff in order to implement what really is ultimately the development that you want to see happen on these properties, part of the excuse me, Brent 403 Business Park East, 100 acres in size. It's a sizable piece of land that Panattoni's taken on, and they intend to bring this to market as quickly as possible for the intended uses, which is employment uses. Please understand that Panattoni purchased the property of June of last year, I believe. They purchased it from TCA, Telephone City Aggregates. That's the entity that had actually initiated the planning application, and Panattoni has now stepped into that process and essentially adopted the planning applications that were submitted by that group, and we are now continuing forward and for this committee tonight seeking final approval. I won't repeat in great detail what you heard from very competent professional planning staff. It is a draft plan of subdivision. It provides for a road, which I will do my best to address the question in terms of its alignment and configuration. The stormwater management pond that's required for the site in order to treat the stormwater from the development blocks. And we have a storm channel that also has the benefit of addressing storm that's flowing through the property from the lands to the west. We have an application before you for a zoning bylaw amendment to implement that. It's essentially the same application as was initiated by TCA. They had requested modifications to both the M1 and the M2 zone. Their application was slightly different in that they were seeking permissions to broaden the uses. M1 is the more prestige industrial type category that aligns with your official plan, and it essentially is the cleaner, drier, uses and doesn't include things like processing, manufacturing, and outdoor storage. We're also seeking that M1 on our blocks that essentially are blocks to the west and the blocks that are on Bethel, with the minor modification just to add warehousing ancillary office. That's the primary focus for Panattoni Development Company. That's what they develop. And we've worked with your staff to the point of an assurance that we will be achieving the highest possible design standards for that stated objective of prestige industrial uses. The interior of the site is proposed as an M2, which is your general industrial designation. The prior application sought a range of additional uses. We're not seeking that same modification. Again, our focus is just on the warehousing and ancillary type office functions. We have put forward 2 site-specific modifications, one of which relates to the parking supply. We reviewed the numbers, we developed our site plans. Panattoni has built hundreds of similar buildings of this nature, so they have a very good appreciation on how much parking is required. So there's certainly enough land, we could build more parking, but it's not required. And the consequence of that is we're going to create asphalt, we're going to create heat islands that's unnecessary and unused. So our request that we justify through best practices and other examples is to come up with a new hybrid rate, which staff have agreed with us is appropriate. We've also included a further zone provision that will apply to all the lands on Bethel. The source of this additional regulation came from your environmental planner. Because there is existing vegetation along there, some of it's going to have to be removed in order to accommodate development, infrastructure, engineering design. There's a road widening. So the request from your environmental planner was that we agree to a 6-meter wide planting strip, the full length of that frontage, to include a continuous row of trees. Since Panattoni acquired the property, we have been engaging with the neighborhood, the immediately affected property owners. We did have an open house with them earlier this year and understand and appreciate from them the issues that are of concern, because there's a large industrial development happening in very close proximity. The issues include tree removals, includes the protection of their groundwater supply, and it relates to stormwater management. They don't want to be in any kind of scenario where there's runoff from this property that may impact their lands. Our assurance to them at the public meeting was that all of these matters will be addressed through the conditions of draft plan approval. And tonight, one of the instruments that we're seeking approval of is a very comprehensive list of conditions of draft approval that deal with standard matters of land development, but also the site-specific considerations that need to be taken into account. So for example, there are conditions in there that require us to produce called an environmental management plan. There's a lot of conditions that deal with stormwater management. There are conditions that deal with groundwater, but more so of an indirect nature. We're required to follow through with a further hydrogeological study. In listening to the comments of the open house and seeing the written submission that came in tonight, I'd like to put forward an additional condition of draft plan approval based on what I've seen happen in other scenarios where a development of this size and this magnitude is happening in proximity to private wells. And the condition is essentially where we will go out in advance of any work taking place on these lands, do a fulsome review of any well that might be impacted, whether it's within a certain radius, log all that information, and then during construction, we'll monitor. So if there are any problems that arise, the second part of that well monitoring study is a mitigation plan. What happens in the event that there is any well interference? It'll be backed up by financial securities. It'll be done by a hydrogeologist that's named by Panattoni. And like any condition, not to my satisfaction, you don't have to trust me on it. You get to trust your own staff, because anything that we produce, if the county doesn't have its own in-house experts, a lot of our technical studies have already followed this path, it will be peer reviewed. It'll be peer reviewed by experts that are retained, and they will review it and ensure that what we're proposing is sound on a technical basis. And ideally, will address the concerns of the neighborhood. So I understand that I have put forward very specific wording about it. I understand it's been provided to the clerk. I have a paper copy if it's appropriate. So my request of you tonight is a further modification to those conditions of draft plan approval to include that additional condition. So at the appropriate time, whether you'd like me to hand you a paper copy of what we're suggesting, or I believe you already have it. So with that, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, we're before you this evening respectfully requesting that you endorse these applications. We'd like your full support so that we can now commence with the next phase of the development, which is the detailed engineering design, wherein we were going to begin to fulfill all of those conditions of approval. We'll process parallel applications for site plan approval for specific development blocks and see these lands come to fruition as quickly as possible. I would like to extend, on behalf of myself and the full Panattoni team and our consultants, our gratitude to your professional staff. They've been of great assistance to us getting us here this evening. There's been a lot of technical dialogue back and forth, and we're grateful for their assistance and certainly appreciate their support in developing conditions of approval for a very complex application. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be pleased to address any questions, and maybe I should just jump right into the road configuration.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's start with that one.
Yeah, so we could maybe put up a graphic of the actual draft plan of subdivision. So appreciate that, I mean, Panattoni didn't initiate the draft plan of subdivision. This is a design that we essentially inherited from the former owners. The reason that Street A is of a north-south configuration and then takes the 90-degree bend to Pottruff was because, my understanding, and again, this was before we were directly involved, but the intent was to eliminate heavy truck traffic on Pottruff and that section of Bethel. So it's there essentially, right now there's that temporary haul road that accommodates all that truck traffic. They're on a portion of Pottruff, and then they're able to connect directly out to Rest Acres Road. So the design here, my understanding, it was a collaboration between the proponents initially and county staff with the prime objective of mitigating and minimizing any heavy truck traffic that would be using those two local streets. I'm not sure if that addresses your question, if there's any follow-up from there.
Go ahead, Councillor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. So I appreciate the thought there, but right now you've got the trucks that are coming from the pit that are going Pottruff Road to Bethel Road, or that some of them use the pit road or whatever you want to call the one in between. I understand that's going to be gone now. That's going to make them go out as far as Bethel Road and up. What this is going to do is not only is it going to potentially not have those trucks turn and turn and turn, they're going to want to do the straight, but it's also going to take trucks from this industrial that are going to head out to Pottruff Road and then back around. So I appreciate the thought of trying to get rid of the heavy truck traffic, but to me, this is only going to add heavy truck traffic to that Pottruff Road, because the ones that are down here in the we'll call it the northeast corner of the industrial park, they're not going to want to go back out to Road A and come out. They're going to want to just go right to Pottruff Road, head out that way.
Mr. Chairman, they may want to. We'll come up with signage. I mean, this is a design that's been reflective of a collaboration with county staff. They want us to come forward with a road design that, to the best of its ability, mitigates that, I'll call it cut-through traffic. That truck traffic, heavy truck traffic, is meant to go through the subdivision, and that road has to be built in its totality at the outset of the development. So the road essentially becomes a swap, because today there's that, I'll call it the cut-through road.
Yep.
That's there that those trucks are using. So they're using a portion of Pottruff down to that road. The intent is that we're going to build Street A in its totality and effectively allow for immediate swap with the minimal separation of time when that connection won't be available. So the design has been done for that specific purposes. Our internal road is going to be 26 meters in width. It's going to be built to a full municipal standard. It's going to be much better condition than what existing sections of Pottruff are. I mean, that road, I've been on, I'm sure you've been on yourself, that road is not designed and constructed to handle that type of traffic. So we have what we believe is the appropriate technical solution to address that. If there's matters of implementation and enforcement, those are certainly matters that we can look at as we go through the detailed design process.
Okay, a follow-up if I could, Mr. Chair. So, okay, so let's, I'm glad you started that at the end. So what would you do in the sense of enforcement? How are you going to stop the trucks that are coming from this industrial park going out onto Pottruff and going around? I'm not talking, sorry to interrupt you there. I'm not talking the gravel trucks that are already there going by that section of Pottruff Road. I'm talking about truck traffic from this industrial park. If you look at the northeast section of that, they're just going to go out to Pottruff Road and go around. How are you going to stop them?
It's a fair and valid question. I don't have the answer for you right now. We'll talk to staff. Maybe the solution is that section of Pontriff gets closed up. It eliminates the connection.
But you have
That's
a
something we can look at. Where Street A is now effectively coming out, service those lands to the north and to the east. Remember, we've also got a piece of land immediately above us, to the north of us, between our property line and the 403, that's also slated for industrial development. That's why we pushed that road up. And that road now has flankage along what I believe is the Edgar property.
Yeah.
In consultation with them, such that when those lands come forward, they will now have immediacy in terms of access onto that new industrial standard road that's built to eliminate that cut through. I'm gonna call it cut through traffic. It might be the more convenient route, but will eliminate traffic using Pontriff.
Sorry to carry this on, Mr. Chair, but one last one through you. You know, great idea to make Pontriff Road dead end, so to speak, but you've also got a resident that's further down Pontriff Road from this Road A. So
That's correct.
that would cause that particular resident to have to go through this industrial park to get to his house. So again, I'm putting it out there. I don't agree with that road coming out onto Pontriff Road. That's just my own. That's fine. If we could just, Mr. Chair, if we could go to page 97 of the report, when it talks of, with me, the letter received from Six Nations, when it speaks of the concern of the removal of the wetland. It states in here that the wetland is listed as 0.47 hectares, which is, they're saying is only 0.03 hectares short of being disqualified for removal from the GRCA. I'm curious, you've read that letter. I'm curious as to your thoughts in response to that letter.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chairman, so the wetland was fully evaluated by our environmental scientists. Natural Resource Solutions Inc. was retained by TCA. They did the fulsome evaluation of it. It is a man-made feature, so it doesn't have that status that you would see in a natural heritage feature that's of provincial significance. That's point A. Features is isolated. It's not contributory to other environmental features. It's an isolated pocket. If you go through that reasoning, and if you go through the reasoning that came forward in the environmental impact study, it puts itself into a category where the feature can be removed, provided that you can demonstrate compliance with other objectives. Those other objectives are being addressed through the ecological management plan that we're preparing. That's condition of draft plan approval that speaks to, if you're to remove that wetland, how can you replicate the feature and its function into either that new stormwater management block that's larger, and I can't dispute you on the figures for the area, but I senses that seems slightly larger than it may be. It might be including the buffer area around it. But in totality, what we're replacing with the stormwater channel that goes through the site and the storm pond on aggregate, on a gross basis, that land area is greater, and we have an ability to design using a range of environmental objectives that will introduce native plant species, appropriate habitat, and other considerations, such that what we're creating in that swim pond is going to function both as a natural feature, but also that infrastructure requirement that will address matters of stormwater management for the subdivision. So, sorry, you never get a short answer from a planner.
No, I appreciate the response. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Gary, for turning that on, because I'm going to go to Councillor Bell next, because I know he was asking about the, and I'll just getting back to what Councillor Pierce and Councillor Bell brought forward about Pontriff Road, and Matt, Director of Planning, but yeah, I mean, he pointed out that could be controlled through signage, right? It might be something that has to be. Councillor Bell, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, through you to delegation. Really following up from what Councillor Pierce has just been talking about, the north-south section of Street A, I presume that will, at some stage, if the lands to the north are developed, will be continued into that land. That would be the obvious access into that land, rather than going down the east-west section of Street A and along Pontriff Road. So at this junction, I'm still struggling with your rationale for keeping the east-west section of Street A open. And when it comes to our considerations later, I'd like to bring up an amendment to the side agreement. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant? Go ahead, Councillor Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Um, The road configuration that was best practices and to have other routes within this area, does that not make it safer if there's ever an accident and trucks have to take an alternate way to get out? Or our neighbors or who will be your new neighbors, the OPP on the corner?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, if I'm understanding the question, so 2 points of access is always preferred. Go on. 2 points of access is always preferred from an emergency standpoint. In the event of, say, an accident at the intersection of Bethel and Street A, the way that the road has been configured with a continuous design, it allows for a secondary ingress into the site. So it's not so much about the truck traffic as it is the ability for emergency vehicles to access the property. That's one of the benefits, and that's why a continuous road pattern had been recommended at the outset when the applications were initially filed. It may very well have been initiated by staff at the pre-consultation stage. So the draft plan, my understanding, has always maintained that connection for Street A, both to Bethel and Pontriff. Not sure if that satisfactorily addresses your question, but I'm happy to assist.
It does, thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? And then I'll ask mine. So, Mr. Webb, are you familiar with the phrase low impact development?
Yes, I am, certainly. LIDs. Yes, it's something that's becoming more and more relevant, more important. Changing climate, stormwater management, groundwater. The area, as I said, is in a wellhead protection zone. We produced a hydrogeological study and a stormwater management report that ultimately came up with a water balance. That is part of maintaining the water balance. Once you develop land, once you hardscape it, you have to find ways to reintroduce that water back into the ground. One of the techniques is LID. So we are well familiar with it. It's ironic. 5-7 years ago, the development community was pushing for LIDs, and we were getting great resistance in terms of how you're going to design it and how you maintain it. And the coin has really flipped now, and the LIDs now are a matter of standard design excellence in any project. So we're well aware of it. It's an issue that's certainly been put forward by your professional engineering staff, and it's something that's been responded to by our civil engineer, our hydrogeologist, and our stormwater management engineer.
Okay, so like to me, reducing the number of parking spaces kind of helps us get more rainwater into the ground for those years when we do see rain. Is there any other examples you can give of what you're actually doing to promote LID? I want to put you on the spot.
Mr. Chairman, no, I mean, planners, we pride ourselves in knowing a little bit about a lot of things. There's a vast array of techniques for LIDs. You'll see drainage swales, you'll see permeable pavers. Stormwater management ponds now can be designed to be, whether it's a quality pond or a quantity pond, that determines whether there's going to be any seepage from that pond. To the best of my knowledge, the development to date, and again, we're about to advance into that detailed engineering phase, but that's where we'll be putting forward the details of this. And it's not just from the county engineering staff, but it's also the Conservation Authority also now have objectives for LIDs in terms of how we're dealing with it. So it's become very complicated, and it's a combination of stormwater management, civil design as it relates to swales, drainage channels, groundwater infiltration. We try and infiltrate clean runoff from roof surfaces as opposed to parking lot. We'll always want to control those areas into a quality pond so that it's treated before it gets released. There's other types of water that will come on site that is clean. So, one of the advantages of these large buildings is that they will capture significant amounts of rainwater that does not necessarily have to go into the stormwater management pond. It can, in fact, be directly integrated into the ground. So it's It's a bit of a remarkable science, fascinating when they speak about water balances now because of all the inputs, stormwater, again, hydrogeology, what are the soil conditions, are they conducive to groundwater infiltration? There's no karst in this area. We don't need to worry about exacerbating a karst-like condition. Here, in fact, I think the soils were quite good and conducive to receiving that added flow. Thank you.
Okay, okay, thank you. As long as you're aware, and it's something I think we've been trying to promote. So anything you can strongly encourage.
Well, believe me, Mr. Chairman, it's not something. It's not a soft task anymore.
Yeah.
It is a requirement.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, seeing no further questions then from the committee, Mr. Webb, thank you. I'll ask you to take your seat then, and we'll go to the public. And so we'll open up this part of the meeting to the public, and I'll ask if there's anyone that would like to speak to this application here tonight. And we have one on Zoom, so see nobody here. Oh, sorry. We'll do anybody that's in person first, and then we'll. So if you want to come up, please.
Good evening.
Start. I'll ask for your name and your address for the clerk.
Barbara Woolley Guest, 197 Potter's Road.
Okay, Barbara, go ahead.
My concern is with the road that is proposed to come out onto Potter's Road. That will be, looks directly across from my driveway. At present, I have no concern with dump trucks going past my house. I don't mind that, I've lived with that. And I'm wondering why we can't replicate what is on the west side of Rest Acres Road because it's aesthetically pleasing to me. And I think it would be as a new development. And with this proposed road, I feel, that it would directly impact my quality of life and my family's, because we're the only ones that are located right there. I spoke with someone who works for James Dick with the dump trucks and showed them the plan, and they didn't understand why the dump trucks would be going down that many turns. And I'm just a lay person, so I'm also concerned with the light pollution and noise pollution that would be generated from this, but I understand this is all progress. The road is the biggest concern that I have at this point. In the past, with the development on the west side of Rest Acres Road, I believe due to that, I lost my well then. I hope that I won't lose it again, and had to pay for that myself. And I've been told when I went to the information meeting via Zoom that it'll be great, but I'm just worried that what if it isn't great? You know, and it does impact us, and there won't be any turning back for me. And I think that's my biggest concern.
Okay, Barbara, I'm going to have the applicant speak to your questions, but I'm going to gather them all before we call. Okay? Thank you very much. And, I'll ask Barbara. You can have a seat. Thank you. Is there anybody else from the public that wishes to speak to this application here tonight? Okay, we'll go to Zoom, and Michael, I'll ask that you take yourself off of mute and go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. Sorry that I couldn't be there in person. My name is Michael Schuberg, and I'm the Executive Director at Five Oaks Center at 1 Bethel Road, just down from the development. And I've had a chance to speak at the public meeting and email back and forth with Chris and others, and also with TCA before Panattoni. And I'm really glad to hear that consideration is being given to maintaining the tree line along Bethel Road. I would love to hear a little bit more detail about what a continuous tree line means. What is the exact definition of that? Is it similar to the 403 development on the west side where there's a few trees on the hill, or is it an actual tree line? I do understand that some trees will need to be removed to widen the road and make it safe. So I'd just be further clarification on what that means. I'd also love further clarification on the well protection amendment that's being added tonight. I'm not sure the exact language for that, but how long is that in effect for? You know, is it 1 year? Is it 10 years? Is it 40 years? How long will the wells be monitored? And what's the guarantee that if neighbors' wells do run dry or water sources damage, that the developer will take responsibility for that? So I am seeking to find out how much money will be left in trust to ensure that the neighbors are taken care of should an unforeseen circumstance arise. I really don't love the idea of dump trucks running all along Potter's Road and then turning right onto Bethel. You know, we have a lot of people that like to go for hikes at Five Oaks when they come to stay with us. They're at that intersection walking, you know, so there's a lot of pros and cons to having the road or not having the road, and all of that needs to be taken into consideration. I also just would really love to know from the municipality, from Brant County, what their plans are for road widening on the east of Bethel Road to take into consideration the stormwater direction. I know last time there was still conversation about which way the stormwater overflow would go. Would it go along Potter's to the south, or would it go along Bethel towards Five Oaks? I don't know the answer to that as well. So I do know that development is good for everybody, but we just want to make sure it's great for the neighbors that are directly impacted as well. So we look forward to working with the developer and making sure that we can maintain a nice, beautiful spot and also have new people coming to our little tiny neighborhood in Brant County. So I think those are all the questions that I had asked in my email. I'll leave it for now. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Michael. And again, we'll try and get all those questions answered this evening as best we can. Okay, so I'll ask again, this will be a second time. Is there anybody from the public that wishes to speak to this application? I'll ask a third and final time if there's anyone from the public that wishes to speak to this application. Okay, seeing none. We don't see anyone. I'll close this part of the meeting off to the public. And I'll ask Mr. Webb if he could come up for help us some of these questions. So, James, what we're talking about, the first member of the public lives at 197 Potter's Road. I believe it's Street A, is coming out straight onto her property. Not sure how you would address that.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, the alignment of the road is based on the initial transportation impact study that was submitted when the applications were initiated by TCA. That's the alignment that, as I understand it, was deemed appropriate in terms of developing these lands. I mean, appreciate the size of the development blocks, and the road location in terms of where it meets with Potter's needs to take into account the adjoining development blocks. How do you create the most efficient layout for future development? How do you accommodate development of adjoining lands with breeder lands to the north? And how do you mitigate any impacts on the adjoining lands? It's my understanding that this alignment that's before you on the draft plan essentially was the alignment that was the product of extensive discussions between county staff, county transportation staff, engineering staff, and the proponents, initially TCA and further with the work that we've been doing. It's the location that's deemed appropriate. And again, what it does with the location as far to the, I won't even try north, south, east, and west. The location closest to the 403 at the top end of the development is it really does minimize the length of time that any truck traffic would need to use Pottruff. And that really was, as I understand, one of the core objectives of that east-west component of the road, which is to eliminate truck traffic from using what is otherwise a rural cross-section municipal street.
Okay, so yeah, I appreciate you going back to those original studies, traffic impact studies, because it kind of answers some of the questions. Another question was the lights from this development. Are you using sky-friendly lights, or talk a little bit about the lighting?
Yeah, again, through you, Mr. Chairman, there's a condition of draft plan approval wherein we're supposed to obviously illuminate streets to a municipal standard. If there's concerns about light spillover, that's addressed through the preparation of a photometrics plan, wherein any off-site lighting can be mitigated through whether it's shields or orientation or the location of light poles. So that's something that will be addressed as we advance through the clearing of that specific condition, which is to the satisfaction, I believe, of your operations division.
We've come a long way with lighting, I give you that. What does a continuous tree line look like? What's your definition of that?
So that specific wording came from the county environmental planner, Michelle Shifley, as I understand it. It was both the width of the planting strip, so I think the zoning bylaw only would require otherwise 3 meters, so she had requested that the width be increased to 6. And then she put the further, and it's effectively her language, is not something you'd see otherwise in the zoning bylaw, but a continuous planting of trees. So that element of the design is subject to its own condition of draft plan approval, wherein we will need to produce landscape plans using the appropriate tree species, which will be submitted to the satisfaction of the county environmental planner. So continuous to mine would be anticipating that these trees are going to grow. They'll probably be staggered, and obviously anticipating that they will fill in over time. But at the outset, we'll want to start with something that is meaningful and does provide some degree of visual.
The well protection monitoring, how long do you see that in effect for?
And Mr. Chairman, my submission on that would be what I anticipate the condition doing at the outset would be our hydrogeologist will put together terms of reference. In terms of their experience, I've done them on a regular basis in Hamilton. There's an accepted standard in terms of proximity to wells, the length of time, pre-construction, during construction, and post-construction. So I'm going to defer to our hydrogeologist, who will then submit it. The county doesn't have the expertise to review and sign off on that. They will send it out again, as I think they have done currently with the current hydrogeological study that we've submitted. So my submission to you on that is I'm not sure the exact length of time, and I'm going to defer to those experts as they refine it. And the specifics of the wording that we've submitted to you tonight by way of that condition clearly provides that certainty or clarity to the county in that the well monitoring study shall be to the satisfaction of.
Okay, and I actually wrote that down to the satisfaction. Thank you. The traffic impact study, maybe it refers to, I'm not sure, but one of the questions asked was about will there be road widening of Bethel? Maybe, I don't know if you can answer that question or not. And then the direction of water flow in the ditches on Bethel.
Yes, I can assist you with that. Through the review of the draft plan of subdivision by county operations staff, they're requesting a 5-meter widening on Bethel. So as part of the plan of subdivision, we will convey to the county at no cost 5-meter wide strip of land, the full flankage of Bethel. And on Pottruff, I believe the road widening is an additional 3 meters to take that road up to, I believe, typically you start with a 20-meter cross section and you'll equally take widenings from both sides of the property. So that went up to 23. I don't believe there's any plans in the immediacy for upgrades on Pottruff, but certainly Bethel is to be significantly upgraded. And as it relates to that final question with regards to stormwater management, yes, that's been an issue. I understand there's been ongoing dialogue with the neighbors about this. The engineers collectively have come up, as I understand it, with an agreed upon functional design as to how that overland flow will route. I appreciate that we're taking the stormwater not just from this site, but in dialogue with the county, we've been asked to design that so we can actually accommodate runoff that's coming from the lands on the west side of Pottruff And it's my understanding that they've achieved a functional level of understanding in terms of how that will be routed once it leaves our property and heads towards the Grand River. And I understand it's partially on the road allowance, and then at some point it diverts from the road allowance for a more direct connection. So I apologize, I don't have the exact details tonight, but it's something that is certainly being addressed by the respective engineers.
Good. No, I appreciate your honesty. Was there any questions that you heard that I missed?
No, I don't believe so, Mr. Chairman. I think we've covered the issues.
I'm just
But
going to
I'm
go
happy-
back to the committee for one more time. Is there any other questions for the applicant? Steps takes the seat again. Hey, Mr. Webb, I appreciate you coming out. Thank you. I'm just going to, is there any way you can share your screen or no?
Through the chair, I tried to share my screen, but I think it creates a bit of an echo situation with my computer and what committee is seeing. But I guess I'll just very quickly speak to the difference between the east side of Rest Acres Road and the west side, because I've heard them compared in terms of the road configuration. I think Councillor Gatwood was correct in terms of the second road connection and how it connects to Pottruff. I'm not our traffic expert with the county, but through discussions with our experts, that second connection is there for the safety of the subdivision, and it was the preferred option because we do have Pottruff Road as a connection point. The west side of Rest Acres doesn't have that second road to connect to, so it really doesn't have an option. It has to just have the configuration it does. That's the main difference between the two. Originally, that east-west connection was proposed to be a little further north, but not knowing what's going to happen with the lands to the north, the spot where it ended up was the best option at this time. But staff would be happy to go back and look at that if that is council's or committee's desire.
Yeah, I appreciate your input on that. So we have a recommendation, or any questions for Matt on that? It's, there are some options still to be looked at. Okay, so we have a recommendation before us. I'm going to ask if we could maybe get a motion just to get that on the floor. Okay, we'll go with Mayor Bailey. Councillor Pierce, are you going to second? Got a question?
I've got another.
Pardon me?
I have another motion.
Oh, okay. Oh, you have a motion.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead. If that's okay with you, Mayor Bailey. Okay.
Yeah, so thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. There's been a lot of good conversation tonight. The applicant's been up a few times and stated, he's going to defer to the professionals. I think I'm going to take a cue on that, and I'm going to ask for a deferral for this whole thing back to our staff, to which he stated was professional, to take another look at this for the Road A in two senses. First thing is, I don't feel it needs to come out to Pottruff Road. And the second part of it is, where it comes out to Bethel Road, we need to understand a little bit better what's going to happen there. Is there going to be lights there, or like what's going to happen on the exit to the south? Because if there's no lights or anything like that, that's going to be major backup. So I would move that we defer this for one cycle. Now, understanding that because we don't meet in August, one cycle is actually going to push it to September. But I would move that we defer this to have another look at that Road A configuration of it.
Can we get a seconder for the deferral? And Councillor Pierce, I'm going to put a few words in your mouth. We'd also see language on the well monitoring in that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so Councillor Pierce has asked for a deferral to have a look at the roads and get some language in there on the well monitoring. Do we have a seconder for that, Mayor Bailey? Okay. Councillor Ferrier?
Yeah, I'd like to speak to the motion.
Normally, we don't speak to deferrals, but go ahead.
Okay. Well, I just, I may be dressed like one today, but there's an old carpenter saying, measure twice, cut once. And I do feel for the applicant here, because it sounds like they kind of inherited some of this part of the planning, which also though tells me that they're not married to that road being the way it necessarily is. And I would also just agree that having our professional planning staff look at this, we might find another solution or two with all the questions that have arisen. So thanks.
Yeah, fair enough. And just, again, the applicant referred to the traffic impact study, which is great. But if the road's going to be there, maybe they could make it a little clearer on why the road. So not speaking to the deferral, but I'll call the deferral. All in favor? All opposed? Okay. So the deferral is passed. So hopefully the next planning meeting, and this is to anyone from the public that's here this evening, and to the applicant and to Tony, is unfortunately, yeah, we do not have an August meeting. And then the next meeting will be first of September. So that takes us to 9.2, which was 11.1, and that is the extension of the county-initiated home-based business pilot project. And is it Zach going to speak to that, or speaking to that? Oh, I apologize. Yeah. Well, you know what? Sometimes when you turn the page, 9.2. Sorry. Amendments to the downtown community improvement plan. Zach, I see your face on the thing, so I apologize. So Zach, do you want to speak to it before we dive into it?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I don't have a visual presentation, but just to speak to the report. It's been about 3 years since Council approved the Burford CIP, the St. George CIP, and we've had the Paris CIP in place for a number of years. So we just wanted to take an opportunity to make sure, are these programs working as intended? Is there an opportunity to make some tweaks? And that's what's in front of you today. We've gone through and made some changes to the programming, hopefully encouraging a little more flexibility, adjusting some of the funding levels. We've used this opportunity to update some of the language so it will better conform with the draft new OP as well. We just want to ensure this program's competitive. And there's some lessons learned here, through the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, where we can encourage some flexibility, say around outdoor dining, and also offer the CIP as a tool for economic recovery by several businesses that were impacted the most throughout the pandemic. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions for Zach? Okay, seeing that, Zach, I get maybe a comment more than anything. I was a little disappointed. I actually talked to the former owner of a business that had this done in Burford on my way here tonight. I stopped them on the street. And they had the work done. It wasn't his place anymore. It was his son. And they applied for a community improvement plan loan or grant. They got it. They made the improvements, and then they went out of business. Is there anything we can do about something like that, or there's no? I guess once it's done, it's done. Do you know what I'm saying? Like it's a little frustrating to see that, I guess.
Through you, Mr. Chair, understood. Depending on the grant, if it's of sizable nature, then there is the ability to come back and request repayment of the grant if it's part of the grant agreement. For smaller grants, that's something we don't typically do. But I hear what you're saying. It is an unfortunate situation where someone invests in their business and then unfortunately goes out of business.
Yeah. I think the business will be sold eventually, but then you've got another facade we have to do. Okay, if there's no questions for Zach, what we're going to do, because this is part of our public hearing, I'll open up this part of the meeting to the public and ask if anybody from the public wishes to speak to these amendments. The second time, if there's anybody from the public that wishes to speak to these amendments. I'll ask a third time, final time, nobody on the Zoom, Briar? Okay, so I'll close this part of the meeting off to the public, and I'll ask the committee how they want to deal with the recommendation. All those amendments moved by Councillor Bell, seconded by Councillor Wheat. Any discussions on that? Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a comment if I could. I appreciate the fact that we've gone back and viewed this. So I just want to say kudos to that. Great report. And I think it's been very beneficial to a lot of people in the county and continue to be that way. And the way you keep it that way is to tweak it every once in a while. So kudos to staff for doing that. Thank you.
Yeah, it was an excellent report, Zach, and I think it's important that we do review it, yeah, to make sure money well spent, so. No other comments, questions? I'll call the vote. All in favor of the amendments to the CIP? Those opposed? None? Okay, so this will take us to 9.3, our new 9.3, and that's so excited to get you up here, Brendan. The home-based business pilot project, and Brendan's going to talk about maybe extending it for a couple of years. Councilor Wheat.
I'll move the recommendation to get it on the floor.
Hold on to
start
that
talking.
because it is a public meeting, John. We're going to have to open it up to the public first, and then we can get on the floor. You go ahead, Brendan.
Perfect. Thank you, Chair Miller. I'll keep it short and sweet. We had a lot of interest in this particular project expressed at the last meeting, so we thought we'd do a short presentation just to let you know how things are going and some of the stuff we're looking into for the future. So we have had multiple successes with this pilot project. It's assisted at least 8 small businesses that we know for sure, has granted them flexible permissions and helped them kind of stay alive during COVID, set themselves up. We haven't received any related complaints through bylaw enforcement, so that was good news. And this is one of kind of our steps pre-new official plan of how we're helping support Complete Communities framework in the County of Brant, making improvements. Just a couple things that we're considering. So tonight there is a recommendation before you. It's to keep in place the program that is established. And we're looking to extend that for a period of 2 years, 2 additional years. And that's to give us some time to get some more feedback on the program, as well as work on our new official plan and new zoning bylaw so that we can make permanent changes at the same time. So kind of doing it all comprehensively. A couple of things that we're looking at reconsidering. Some stuff based on inquiries from businesses, maximum area of the business uses permitted. So we do have kind of a strict, I think it's 50 square meters in this program. And we're considering maybe a sliding scale based on lot size or based on building sizes. So that's something we'll be considering as we kind of consider permanent requirements. As well, the maximum number of clients, customers or students. So we've had some inquiries about this, in particular from businesses interested in maybe increasing the number. I believe it's limited to 2 or 3 right now. So again, maybe a sliding scale related to property size, related to hours of business, just things we're considering for the future. And then just kind of based on best practice in other municipalities, a licensing program is an option. And that obviously comes with fees and the additional staff requirements, but it's just something that we're keeping in the back of our minds as well, and we'll be looking at when we put permanent permissions in place. So with that short presentation, I'll turn it back over for the public portion of the meeting. Recommendation for extending this 2 additional years, and if there's any questions or comments, I'm happy to field.
Okay, thank you, Brendan. Are there any questions for Brendan on this?
Through you, Mr. Chair. It may not be for Brendan, but maybe it's more of a recommendation question for staff generally, maybe our comm staff. But I know when we did the piece about different uses of farms, and when we've done a couple of other initiatives like this, we've had success stories and little profiles with 8 of these businesses. I just wonder if that might be something, especially if we're announcing it for a 2-year period. I find members of the public, when they see it, they go, oh, that's kind of like this thing I've been thinking of doing. And that might get some more folks wanting to try out the program over the next. Is that something that's being considered or communicated with communications about?
That's a great question. Yeah, so that's definitely something we can work probably with Zach and his team in economic development on as well. Like you say, we've had some conversations specific to the farm related stuff. And we can definitely branch out to the specific program to kind of make it better known as well.
Any other questions for Brendan? Seeing none, I'm going to open this part of the meeting up to the public, and I'll ask if there's anyone from the public that wishes to speak to this pilot project being extended for 2 years. I'll ask a second time if there's anyone from the public, and I'll ask a third and final time, and Brian, there's nobody on Zoom. Okay, so I'll close this part of the meeting off to the public. I'll bring it back to committee, and I believe Councillor Wheat said he would move it. So for a seconder, Mayor Bailey. Any further discussions, comments, questions on the 2-year extension? Seeing none, all in favor? Counselor Bell, are you voting with your left hand or your right hand? Okay. And your digital hand too, so. That brings us down to communications. There are none. We'll go to other business, and we'll go to Counselor Bell first.
Yeah, thank you. I hope you can hear me. My question, Mr. Chair, was, or my other piece of business was related to the Nith Peninsula development and the work that is being done to service the site there. Some time ago, the contractor, or perhaps it was a subcontractor to the contractor, went well beyond the limits of what was agreed in terms of site servicing, to the extent that the work in site clearance and site preparation was almost visible from Lions Park. And our staff did the very right thing, and they called a halt to the work, and they asked the contractor to look again at his processes and make sure that before he began work again, that to the satisfaction of the county, they knew exactly what they were permitted to do and what they were not permitted to do. My concern is that this is the second time this particular contractor has overstepped the mark in Paris, and all within the last year or so. I would like to understand the recourse that we have to effectively penalize the contractor, to make it a very strong message from us as the county that if they agree to a certain limit on their activities, that they stay within it. And I'm not looking to be overly punitive, but I think they have taken away quite a number of very mature trees. I think one means of reimbursement and penalization would be to ask or demand that the contractor plants a significant number of new trees to make up the difference. And I would like to understand from staff where we got in that discussion.
Okay, just a question to you, Councilor Bell. Have you been in discussion with staff about this already previously?
Mr. Chair, we have mentioned this to staff. And Councillor Howes, if he was here, has also mentioned it to staff. We have not got a firm answer back. It's been left in a bit of a limbo. And with all respect to the concerns that staff have about the legal issues that may surround this, it's now 2 months ago that the contractor was allowed to go back to work, and still we've heard nothing. So I'm a little bit frustrated that we haven't moved forward on this. I would like an update.
Okay, so we will ask staff if they can help us out here with the frustrations going on and what we can talk about in open session. So I don't know, man, if you want to take a crack, or Michael or Jody, or help us out a little bit.
Through you, Mr. Chair. And so, first of all, I appreciate Councillor Bell's concerns with this. I think we have to acknowledge that there's two situations at play here. There's a planning application and a set of associated permits, and they have a set of rules. And then there's charges based on somebody who not doing something appropriate. And it's difficult. We have to keep those, and I think the solicitor would agree with me. We have to keep those things separate. So the planning application, the bringing the applicant into compliance with what they're supposed to be doing is one task. I think we've done that. It's my understanding that there are charges pending, but that's a legal process, and that will have to go through the courts. So my suggestion is a council, and Pam is certainly much more up to speed on this situation. She's off this week on vacation. So my suggestion is that I can have Pam do up a Friday file memo to council on the status of the charges, and then if council wants to talk about it further, we can do that at the Planning Development Committee. Well, actually, we can do it on any of the committees. If you'd like to make that request, we can have an in-camera session when Pam's back, and she can update you on the charges. My suspicion is that Jody, the solicitor who's here, probably has some knowledge of these things, but probably is quite ready to speak on them. That would be my suggestion if council wants an update on that. But I can assure council that we do take the concerns seriously. We are moving in accordance with what the law allows us to do. But these are court matters. They don't happen overnight. Thank you.
Councillor Bell?
That sounds like a good way forward. I appreciate that, Mr. Chair, and would actually like to recommend that we do have that in-camera session, because if this kind of situation arises again, it would be helpful for us to know how we should react as a council, and certainly how we can respond to many requests and concerns that are expressed to us by residents who could see it just as clearly as I could see it.
Mr. Chair, I would suggest we are planning on having an education session for a matter at the Administration Operations Committee later this month. We could tack on an in-camera session on this matter as well.
Right, appreciate the bringing that to our attention, Councilor Bill. And yeah, no, I could see that being a matter for another time in another session, closed versus open. Okay, we'll go to Councilor Gatward. You had two items. Joan, do you want to start with item number 1?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My items are quite short. I was alerted that on page 110 tonight of our package that Energy Plus has now become Grand Bridge Energy. And for those councillors around the table that didn't realize that, it happened on May 2nd of this year. And that's when the merger took place with City, and that was part of the deal with them, that the name Energy Plus would change to Grand Bridge Energy. So that's now our citizens' new name for the power company, including Hydro One, who also operates in the county, as you know. So that was the first item I wanted to mention. I don't know if all the residents were notified in their bills or whether that's coming, but I thought we should know. And the second thing was, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to thank CAO Bradley for his assistance to Habitat for Humanity recently in having a pole relocated on the Willowdale build site. They were having difficulty with that, and he was very helpful in getting their issues solved and at the right price. So thank you to CAO Bradley for that work. That's all I had, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Councilor Gatward. CAO Bradley. And I had one item, they're under business, and I did talk to our director of planning ahead of time about this. There's a gravel pit operation going on in Bishop's Gate by St. Mary's. I think most of us, we better all know that around this table. And I learned from one of the neighbors that they are building and will be operating a concrete batching plant on site. Now, I think I've attended every single public meeting that was held regarding this gravel pit. I certainly attended all the council meetings that had to do with this gravel pit. And not once the term concrete batching plant come up during any of those meetings that I recall. So what my question, I guess, to the director of planning is, a concrete batching plant, I guess, is allowed, that's my understanding, without going through the municipality, as long as it's an accessory use, as long as they conform to the MNR rules, and they'll need a site plan control. But my question is, how do the neighbors, and certainly the one that brought it to my attention, how do they find out the amount of noise, the amount of dust? Is there going to be extra truck traffic associated with this concrete batching plant? Will they be requiring a permit to take water just for this? In other words, what's the water usage, because it's all well water or groundwater? What's their hours of operation? How do the neighbors go about finding this information? Because it's obviously not going through this process. How do we find out about it so we can tell the people?
Yeah, through the chair, because this is a permitted use through our zoning, as long as it remains accessory to the primary use, which is the actual gravel pit itself, there is no planning application required to add that accessory use to the overall operation of that gravel pit. They do still require a site plan application, and that would also trigger provincial approvals as well. Our site plan process is not a public process, but all of that information as part of the site plan process is available to the public should they have any questions. Specifically in speaking to the number of trucks, noise mitigation, water usage, those are things that I personally will follow up on this particular site with the applicant to find out those details. And I should have those details available by the end of week, early next week. But in general, those details can be acquired by calling planning department, and we'd be happy to provide them to the neighbors.
Okay, I will hold you to that. I'm going to follow up in case I have questions, in case Councillor Chambers has questions, in case anybody has questions for the mayor in particular. So, like I say, it's just I guess you learn something new every day. So, and I did not know about this being permitted on all that stuff. So I look forward to that. So, anything else for anybody want to bring up before we call this? Okay, seeing none. I guess the next we have to go on camera. So, Gary, I'll have you shut us off YouTube. Anybody that you're leaving? Okay, now we're on camera. So, Jody, I'm gonna let me know when you're good. And we're good. Okay, so that takes us out of camera and open session. And please note that there will be no meeting scheduled for August, so the next session. Councillor Chambers? I couldn't. Yeah, well, based on what we've seen at the last council meeting, there's no meeting in October. There's a meeting in September, obviously September 6th, and there's no meeting in October.
Yeah, confirming, through you, Mr. Chair, we are recessing for August as we normally do, and then we're recessing for October for the election. We will last at council. At council.
Okay. Yep, fair enough. Appreciate that. Okay. So I'm going to call this meeting adjourned.